Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've been working backstage in WWE for over a decade. I've seen it all: broken bones, real fights that spilled out of the ring, desperate rookies crying after botching a move on live TV. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has haunted me like what I saw that night. It was just past 1 a.m., and the arena was a hollowed out shell of what it had been just hours before. The roar of the crowd had faded into memory, and most of the roster was long gone, leaving only a few crew members behind to finish up. I was one of them, doing my usual rounds, making sure everything was packed and ready for the next city. That's when I saw it. One of the locker room doors was open, just a crack. Light flickering inside. That was odd. We always made sure the locker rooms were cleared and locked before heading out. Maybe someone had forgotten. Maybe one of the guys had left something behind. I pushed the door open, expecting to see a stray gym bag or a forgotten water bottle. Instead, I heard my name, Mike. It was soft, almost a breath rather than a voice. I froze. The room was empty, just rows of metal lockers, the smell of sweat and old liniment in the air, a few scattered towels on the benches. The only movement was the fluorescent light above, flickering like a dying pulse. I swallowed, my throat dry. Hello. Nothing. Just the hum of electricity, the faint drip of a leaking faucet somewhere in the distance. I turned toward the mirror above the sinks, more out of instinct than anything, and that's when I saw him. A man, sitting on one of the benches behind me. I could see him, clear as day in the reflection. He was wearing an old-school wrestling singlet, the kind you'd see in grainy footage from the 80s. His skin was pale, almost gray, stretched too tight over his bones. His hair was slicked back, dark and greasy, and his eyes, God, his eyes were just empty, hollow, like two black pits. And he was smiling, not a friendly smile, not even a menacing one. It was worse than that. It was a knowing smile, like he had been waiting for me. My breath caught in my throat. I turned around so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. There was no one there. I spun back toward the mirror, and he was still sitting there, still smiling. A cold rush of air wrapped around me, and I swear to God, it felt like something was breathing against my neck. I bolted. I don't remember running out of the room. I don't remember slamming the door behind me. But suddenly, I was outside in the hallway, my heart hammering, my lungs burning. One of the senior crew members, Carl, was standing a few feet away, watching me with an expression I can only describe as knowing. He didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask why I looked like I had just seen a ghost. Instead, he sighed. You saw him, didn't you? I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. Carl rubbed a hand over his face. That was Tommy Savage's locker room. The name hit me like a chair shot to the skull. Tommy Savage. He was a mid-quarterback in the late 80s. The kind of guy who never made it past the second match on the card, but was respected by all the boys in the back. A workhorse. Reliable. Until the night he dropped dead right in the middle of the ring. Heart attack, they said. He had pushed himself too hard. Tried to finish the match, even as his chest was tightening, even as the life was draining out of him. By the time the referee realized something was wrong, it was too late. He was gone, and now, somehow, I had just seen him, or something pretending to be him. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was really Tommy or just a shadow of him, a piece of whatever energy was left behind. All I know is that I never went near that locker room again. But sometimes, when I'm backstage after a show, in the quiet hours when the crowd is gone and the arena is settling into silence, I hear it, a whisper, my name, and I know, deep down, that somewhere in the shadows of these old arenas, he's still waiting, still watching, and still smiling. After that night, I did everything I could to avoid that hallway. If I had to pass by it, I kept my eyes straight ahead, never glancing toward the door. But the thing about wrestling, it never lets you leave the past behind. A few weeks later, we were in another city, another arena, a different locker room, different walls, but the same uneasy feeling in my gut. The same heavy silence lingering in the air long after the last fan had gone home. That's when the nightmares started. They weren't dreams. Not really. They were too vivid, too real. I'd find myself back in that locker room, staring into the mirror, unable to move. The flickering light above me casting twisted shadows across the walls. And he'd be there, sitting on the bench, waiting. The first few nights, he just watched me, never spoke, never moved. Just that same smile, like he knew something I didn't. Then, on the fourth night, he whispered, "Stay." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. But it wasn't over, because when I sat up, still trying to shake the nightmare from my head, my phone buzzed. A notification, a video file, no sender, no name, just a blank message with an attachment. With shaking hands, I tapped it open. It was footage from inside the locker room, the same one from that night. The camera was angled toward the mirror, and I saw myself standing there, staring, just like in a dream. But then something changed. In the reflection, Tommy stood up, but I never moved. The version of me in the mirror stood frozen, while Tommy stepped forward, closer and closer, until he was right behind my reflection. And then, he turned, not in the mirror, not just in the reflection, but in the real world. In the video, my head snapped toward the camera, and I smiled. Not my smile, his. The video cut out. My screen went black, and then, for just a second, my phone's reflection flickered, and I saw him, not in the mirror, not in a video, standing right behind me, smiling. I don't remember much after that, just that I woke up on the hotel room floor, my phone shattered beside me, the screen dead, no sign of the video, no proof that it had ever existed. But I knew he was still there. I quit WWE a few weeks later, told them it was burnout, that I needed time away from the business. They understood. Everyone does, eventually. Wrestling takes a piece of you, whether you want it to or not. But it wasn't the business that took something from me. It was him. And even now, late at night, when the world is quiet and I'm alone in the dark, I still see him. Not in mirrors anymore, not in dreams, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear a whisper, "Mike," and I know I'll never really leave. Story 2. I've worked security for WWE events for a few years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. My job is simple. Make sure nobody sneaks in, keep unauthorized people out, and lock things down after the show. That last part, that's where the trouble starts. Most nights are the same. The crowd leaves, the wrestlers head back to their hotels, and the crew starts breaking things down. By the time I make my final rounds, the arena is usually dead silent, except for the occasional distant thud of something being wheeled out or the soft murmur of workers finishing up. But on this particular night, there was something else in the air. A weight, a presence. I chalked it up to exhaustion. We were in an old venue, one of those places with history in its bones. The kind of history that lingers. There was something about the place, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I was making my last security sweep when I stepped onto the main floor and glanced at the ring. That's when I saw him. A man, standing in the ring. At first, I thought it was one of the wrestlers messing around. Maybe someone who wanted a quiet moment alone in the ring before heading out. I mean, I get it. These guys practically live for this. The ring is sacred to them. But something about him was off. His back was turned to me, his head lowered, shoulders stiff. He was wearing old-school wrestling gear, black trunks, knee-high boots, wrist tape. The whole look screamed 1970s or 80s. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel something was wrong. I grabbed my radio. Hey, who's still in the ring? The response crackled through almost immediately. Nobody. Everyone's gone. I frowned. You sure? I'm looking right at someone. Not possible. The voice on the other end replied. Roster's already at the hotel. Crew's packing up. You're the only one on the floor. I looked back. The man was still there, unmoving. The hairs on my arms prickled. I took a step closer, my boots echoing in the empty space. Sir, you're not supposed to be here. He didn't respond, didn't turn, didn't breathe. A cold weight settled in my chest. I was about 10 feet from the ring now, close enough to see the fine details of his gear. The fabric looked old, not in a worn-out way, but in a way that didn't belong, like it had been pulled straight out of a different decade. I swallowed hard and moved closer. I reached for the apron, ready to climb up and confront him, when the lights above flickered. And in that split second of darkness, the ring was empty. I blinked, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted around the arena. There was no way in hell someone could have left that fast. The ropes hadn't moved. The mat was still. There was no sound, no rush of footsteps, no sign of movement at all. He was just gone. I exhaled sharply and did what any normal person would do. I got the hell out of there. But it didn't end there. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I went to the security room to check the footage. I needed proof. Needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. I fast-forwarded through the last hour, watching the grainy black and white feed of the ring. And there it was. The ring. Empty. Even in the exact moment I knew I'd seen him, the camera showed nothing. Just an empty ring, surrounded by a silent arena. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. I saw him. I knew I saw him. I backed away from the monitor, my stomach twisting in knots. That's when one of the older security guys walked in. He took one look at my face and smirked. You saw him, didn't you? I turned to him, my throat dry. What the hell are you talking about? He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. The wrestler, the one that shouldn't be there. A chill ran down my spine. You've seen him. He nodded. Not just me. A bunch of us have, over the years. I shook my head. Who is he? The guy sighed and looked at the screen, the empty ring glowing faintly under the flickering arena lights. Back in the 80s, there was a wrestler, a guy who never made it big. He did dark matches, small circuits, always chasing that dream of getting on TV. He put in the work, but it never happened. One night, after a house show, he told a few guys that he was done, that if he couldn't make it in WWE, life wasn't worth living. I felt my stomach drop. What happened? The man's jaw tensed. They found him in a hotel room the next morning. He'd taken his own life. A heavy silence settled between us. I turned back to the monitor, staring at the empty ring. That's why he's still here, isn't it? I murmured. The guy shrugged. Some say he never got his moment, that he's still waiting, stuck between this world and the next, hoping for one last shot at the ring. I swallowed hard. That was the last time I ever did a security sweep alone. And to this day, when I step into an empty arena, I don't look at the ring too long. Because I know he's still there, waiting. I wish I could say that was the last time I saw him. But some things don't let go that easy. A few weeks after that night, I was working another event, different city, different arena. I kept my head down, did my job, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that followed me ever since I saw him. I kept telling myself it was just exhaustion, just a trick of the mind. Then it happened again. Same routine. Late night sweep. Everyone gone. The ring should have been empty, but it wasn't. I was walking past the entrance tunnel, my boots echoing on the concrete, when something made me stop. That feeling, that damn feeling. The air got thick, like stepping into a place where you're not supposed to be. My breath felt too loud, too heavy, and then I saw him, standing in the ring. This time, he wasn't facing away. He was looking right at me. My whole body locked up, my breath caught in my throat. His face, God, his face was wrong. Pale, eyes too dark, too hollow. He wasn't just watching me. He was studying me like he knew, like he remembered me. I wanted to turn around, to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But my feet wouldn't move. Then, the lights flickered. Not just the ones above the ring, but all of them. The entire arena plunged into darkness for a second, maybe two. When they came back on, he was gone. I stood there, frozen, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. My radio crackled to life, nearly making me jump out of my skin. "You all right, man? You're not answering." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Yeah, just lost in thought. I didn't check the footage that night. I already knew what it would show, and I knew I'd see him again, because some ghosts never leave the ring." Story 3. The thing about working backstage in WWE is that you get used to weird things happening. You learn not to question the creaks and groans of an old arena settling at night, or the strange echoes bouncing off the empty seats when the fans are long gone. But there are some things you can't explain away. Some things get under your skin and stay there, like a splinter you can't dig out. This was one of those things. It happened on the European tour a few years back. We were in a venue that had been around forever. One of those old school coliseums with arched ceilings and steel rafters that seemed to hum when the crowd got loud. The place smelled like decades of sweat, spilled beer, and something else. Something stale and musty, like an old costume trunk left unopened for too long. The night's show had ended, and most of the wrestlers had already cleared out, heading back to the hotel for some well-earned rest. A few of us from the ring crew were still working, breaking down the setup. That's the thing people don't realize about these events. After the spectacle, the lights, the fireworks, there's still hours of work left to do. I was coiling cables near the entrance ramp, my hands aching from a long night. when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, steady, coming from above. Now, arenas make noise when they settle. You hear pops and cracks from the beams cooling, the occasional scurry of a rat in places you'd rather not think about. But this was different. These were heavy, deliberate steps, like someone was pacing back and forth along the upper balcony. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Jake, one of the other crew guys, straightened up and wiped the sweat from his face. "You hear that?" he asked. I nodded. He frowned, glancing up at the darkened seats above us. Thought everyone left. I did too. The last of the talent had boarded the bus nearly half an hour ago. The only people left in the building were us. "Hey, you get up there," Jay called out. His voice echoed, thin and reedy in the empty arena. Silence. Then the footsteps stopped. A moment later, we saw him. A man stood at the top of the stairwell, leading down toward the ring. He was huge, built like an old-school heavyweight, with broad shoulders and thick legs that looked like they could drive a man straight through the mat. He was dressed in black trunks and boots, his posture stiff and unmoving. But his face was wrong. It was blurred, almost pixelated, like a scrambled TV signal from an old VHS tape. The harder I looked, the less I could make out. It was like my brain couldn't process what it was seeing, like it refused to register that this person, was standing there. I blinked, and he was gone, just like that. Jake and I exchanged a look, and without a word, we both ran up the stairs. Our boots pounded against the concrete as we reached the balcony, searching for any sign of him. Nothing. No shifting shadows, no retreating footsteps, just rows of empty seats stretching into the darkness. "There's no way," Jake whispered. I swallowed hard. The only exits up, there were 2 locked doors that led to the maintenance corridors. No one could have left that fast. We went back down, neither of us saying much, but the air felt heavier, charged with something unseen. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see him again, but the stairwell was empty. Later that night, as we packed the last of the equipment, I brought it up to one of the older crew members. He'd been with WWE for years, long before my time. "Did either of you get a good look at him?" he asked. Jake shook his head. His face was all messed up, light blurry. The older guy's face went pale. He ran a hand through his graying hair and sighed. "You saw the forgotten one." I frowned. "The who?" He hesitated before answering. "Back in the 90s, there was a wrestler. Big guy. Real talent. Or so they said. But he never got a shot. Never made it to TV. He wrestled in dark matches, always waiting for his break, but it never came. One day he just disappeared." "What do you mean disappeared?" I asked. "No one knows," the man said quietly. "One night he wrestled. The next he was gone. No one ever saw him again. No records, no news, nothing. It was like he never existed." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Jake let out a nervous laugh. "You're messing with us." The older guy didn't smile. "I wish I was. But you're not the first to see him. Over the years, people have spotted him in different arenas. Always the same thing. Big guy, black trunks, blurred face. Some say he never left. Bet he's still waiting for his chance." I didn't sleep much that night, and every time we came back to that venue, I heard them, those same slow, deliberate footsteps above us, pacing back and forth. as if someone was waiting for a call that would never come, waiting for a chance that had long since passed, waiting for the match that would never happen. I wish I could say that was the last time I ever felt him, the forgotten one. That after that tour stopped, the footsteps, the feeling of being watched, the shadowy presence faded into just another creepy backstage story. But it didn't. It followed us. The next time I felt him was a few weeks later in a different city, a different country. We were setting up in another old arena, this one in Germany. The architecture was different, but the feeling was the same. History soaked into the walls, a place that had seen thousands of matches, each one leaving something behind. I was running cable under the ring when I heard it. The steps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. This time, I didn't say anything. I just froze, listening. It was coming from the upper catwalk, a metal grid above the stage where the lighting rigs were set up. There shouldn't have been anyone up there. The lighting crew wasn't due for another hour. Jake was on the other side of the ring, fiddling with one of the turnbuckles. I didn't know if he heard it too, but his shoulders were tense, his movements sharp and rushed like he wanted to finish and get the hell out. I slowly crawled out from under the ring, glancing up. The catwalk was dimly lit, nothing but steel railings and hanging cables. But then, a figure, just standing there, big, broad-shouldered, wearing black trunks and boots. Even from down below, I could tell. His face was wrong. That same, distorted blur, like reality itself, was rejecting him. My throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen him. But I couldn't. I was locked in place, my eyes glued to that spot on the catwalk. Then, he moved. Not walked. Not turned. Just shifted. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. I felt sick, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My stomach twisted, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of my neck. Jake must have noticed my face because he asked, "You saw him, didn't you?" I swallowed. "You did too." He just nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's finish and get the hell out of here." We worked faster than I think we ever had before. Neither of us spoke about it again that night. But we didn't have to, because he wasn't done with us yet. The last time I saw him was months later, back in the States. We were in an old venue in Chicago, one of those buildings that had seen wrestling history unfold over decades. It was almost comforting in a way, familiar ground, home turf. But that night, the energy was off. Even the wrestlers felt it. The locker room was quieter than usual, the usual banter and joking subdued. The production guys seemed restless, checking their gear twice, their eyes flickering toward the rafters like they expected something to go wrong. We finished setup, and the show went off without a hitch. The crowd was electric, the matches solid. It was one of those nights that reminded you why you love the business. But then the show ended. The fans left, and the quiet set in. Jake and I were the last ones in the arena, waiting for the last truck to finish loading. We sat in the front row, exhausted, letting the silence settle over us. Then, boom, 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 loud, deliberate footsteps. But this time, they weren't above us. They were coming from the entrance ramp. I turned my head slowly, and there he was, standing at the top of the ramp, bathed in the dim glow of the emergency lights. Huge, silent, waiting. His blurred face seemed to shift like something struggling to form, features trying to emerge but failing. It was like he was stuck between existing and fading away. And then, the worst part, he started walking toward us. Each step echoed through the empty arena, measured, unhurried. My breath caught in my throat. My body screamed at me to run, to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't move. Neither could Jake. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I should have been able to see his face. But there was nothing, just static. Then, the arena lights flickered, and when they came back on, he was gone, just gone. Jake and I bolted out of there. Neither of us saying a word until we were in the truck, driving away from that place as fast as we could. We never saw him again after that, but we still talk about it. Sometimes, when we're a few drinks in and the night is long, there's something out there, something left behind. A wrestler who never got a shot, whose name was forgotten, whose matches were never recorded. He's still waiting, still walking the arenas, still searching for a match that will never come. And maybe, just maybe, if you stay too late, if you linger in the wrong place at the wrong time, you'll hear him too. Those slow, deliberate footsteps, coming closer, waiting for his chance, waiting for you.